In this lesson, we'll take a look at using external images as texture files in 3ds Max. So there'll come a time when we kind of get to the edge of what procedural texture maps can do for us, and we'll need to actually add images from photographs or other images that we've created and use those as texture maps. So how do we integrate those into our materials? Let's take a look at the cockpit here. And so looking at this, we want to actually add an image for the grill in here. And so that's going to give us a good kind of illusion of detail in here when really we just have some flat polygons, but we want to give the impression that there's a lot more mechanical stuff going on in here with some transparency and so forth. So to do that, we need to add an image file. So we'll go into our material editor, and let me just pull this over so that we can kind of see everything, and we'll just size it down a bit. Okay, and if you remember, we use the multi-material here, multi-subobject material. So let me go ahead and move this out of the way. So we've got this material that we've applied here. Now on the blue material, that's going to be the one that we want to apply the texture map to. So we'll follow this over. The blue material is feeding into the multi. So we'll go ahead and follow this back through, and we'll go down the blue branch. And so we want to actually add an image file into this material, and we want to add it to the color. Okay, so we want to replace this blue color with whatever image we have. So we could go ahead and look under maps. We could grab a bitmap and drag it over, or we can just go ahead and pull from the input on the diffuse into an empty area, go to standard, and then just choose bitmap. This is going to bring up the select bitmap image file window here, and this is going to allow us to pick our image that we're going to be using. So if we want to go into our project files, and in the Max project under scene assets images, there's going to be an image called metal 103. If you want to use that, feel free to use something else if you like, but this is going to be provided for you if you want to go ahead and use that. So grab that image, and let's go ahead and open that up. So that's going to load that up into our bitmap, which is piped into the diffuse color. If we take a look at our material, you can see that we have an M right next to this diffuse color telling us that we have a map associated now with this color. And we go down to our maps rollout, and we can see that we have now this map, and we can see the name of it associated with this diffuse color. Okay. If we wanted to dial down the amount, we could go ahead and do that. And you can see that that's now blended with that diffuse color that we have defined. If we go ahead and take that up, it's getting 100% of that color information from our texture. Take it down to 10, it's getting very little. Okay. We can also go through and look at the parameters for our actual bitmap, and we can see where that bitmap is located. We can reload it. We can turn it around a little bit. If we wanted to move it, we could do that. But let's go ahead and leave that as is. And you can see you can get the same thing here. If you go ahead and double click on this, you can get the parameters for your image. Okay, so this image is basically, you can think of this square as that 0 to 1 UV space that we looked at, that square that we laid out everything into. So looking at this, let's go ahead and make sure that we can see it in our viewport. So we'll go show standard map. You can see that now the information from this is coming through just the areas that were influenced by that blue material. Let's go ahead and add back our Turbo Smooth on top of this. So now you can see that instead of just seeing some flat polygons, we're now seeing the color information come through. It gives us a lot of great detail in there without actually having to model it. Okay. Now if we were to go in and look at our unwrap UVW, go in and look at our UVs, we can see that these are actually over here, and so what it's doing is tiling this texture file. So if we go ahead and take a look at this metal, you can see it's actually tiling this over. So it would, if this material were applied to the whole model, it would have also, apply it to the rest of these polygons, but it's not. The red material is actually the one that's being applied here. So because it's on just on these faces, those are the ones that are being affected. Now if we wanted to move these, you can come in here, and let's say if we kind of rotated those around, you can see that texture map moves. Okay, and so you can move these elements around, and it will actually change what is being associated with these individual textures. I kind of like having the the line go at an angle a little bit, so I'm going to actually leave them pretty close to that. Okay. I'll go take the Turbo Smooth back on. Now if we look back in our editor here and we go into the bitmap, we've got cropping and placement, so we can also come in here and let's place it. And hit apply, and we can now sort of move this texture around a little bit if we want to do that. Move it that way. So you can get a little bit of adjustment in that way as well. Okay. And we want to make sure that this bitmap is using the explicit map channel, which is the map channel that we've created our UVs on. We also have some other options here if we want to do some planar mapping and so forth. But for this, we want to go ahead and just leave it on the explicit channel. Okay. So just make sure that you go ahead and grab the image that you want to make sure it is piped into or wired into the correct channel here on our material. So there are a number of different channels that we can actually use. This one we're using color. That's going to be probably the main one you're going to be using. But we can get into adding things like bump maps. Okay. So let's, in the next lesson, let's look at modifying some of our materials to integrate a bump map. So that's going to be the illusion of raised detail rather than just flat color. And so on several of these pieces, we'll be able to do that by taking some of our existing maps and turning those into a bump. So let's take a look at that in the next lesson.